Good afternoon, YouTube. This is in response to an interview done by Vashi with Premier Jason Kenney last month. I apologize that I wasn't able to cover it, so I'm covering it now, and let's get into it. Thank you for watching.
Alberta Premier Jason Kenney joins us now in studio. Hi, Premier. Thanks for coming in. I appreciate it.
Good to be here.
I know the meeting is canceled in person today. Any update on whether the meeting by phone will take place and at what
I'm told
point?
there will likely be a conference call with premiers and the Prime Minister tomorrow. I guess the Prime Minister is at home in isolation. And I certainly hope there'll be a call because goodness knows we have a lot of very important things to talk about.
Let me ask you about that. I want to ask you about what Alberta is doing as far as coronavirus is concerned, but let's start on what the ask is. I know that there's a couple of tracks here. Let me start with the healthcare track. They announced $500 million. Do you know what Alberta's portion of that is or what the need is from your province at this point?
Well, I can tell you that our initial budget for responding to coronavirus was $80 million based on the level of infection and preparedness to this point. But Vashi, we start to see some of these projections. I mean, Minister Matt Hadji said yesterday, potential 30 to 70% infection rate. I think that's becoming the standard amongst epidemiologists in the United States. It's hard to imagine that we would avoid the level of infection in the United States, even with very robust public health measures. So that is very big. And it's clearly like $500 million for all the provinces. Let's say that's done on a per capita basis. That would be about $60 million for Alberta. We've already exceeded that. Yesterday, to put this in perspective, the British government brought in their budget, which I believe had 17 billion pounds, or like 30 billion Canadian dollars, just for the public health portion of this, not for the economic response to it. So that's probably more in the scale of what we should be looking at in Canada.
So is it fair for me to say that you would be asking the federal government for more where the public health side is concerned?
Well,
they've already announced?
Yes. I will just be diplomatic about this and say that yesterday or this week's announcement from the federal government was just an initial commitment, but
they're saying that, to be fair. I mean, they are saying this is the first announcement, but you're saying for sure you're going to need more.
Yeah, unless this thing suddenly stops cold in its tracks and that would be contrary to the science, then there will be, just the public health crisis alone, without dealing with the economic impact of it, we're talking, I'm sure, well north of $10 billion, at least in Canada.
Mm-hmm. And the portion that you would need of that? Any estimation?
Well, I'm saying,
I know it's
we don't have those projections yet. Again, if the bottom end of the spectrum that we're now talking about in North America is true 30%, we're talking there about 1 million Albertans being infected prospectively.
What about the economic impact? And this is a conversation that you've been having for a long time with the federal government. You met with Deputy Premier Chrystia Freeland. I had her on the show last night. I asked her repeatedly if, for example, the ask you've made around fiscal stabilization will be a part of the budget, or if there's something directed at Alberta coming before that. I wasn't able to get any specifics. Do you have any?
And I thank you for following up with your questions.
Well, now I'm going to follow up with you. Do you have any assurances from the federal government that money is coming in any capacity?
No.
And why do you think that is?
Look, all I can say is we got all 13 provinces and territories on side endorsing Alberta's request for a retroactive lifting of the fiscal stabilization payments and obviously prospective as well, because we're going to be taking a massive hit on revenues again for the second time in 5 years. We made that point very clear to the Government of Canada, and it's become radio silence on that front. Now,
even today with Minister Freeland?
We didn't get into that today. We were talking about the public health crisis. Minister Morneau did speak with my Finance Minister Travis Toews today and earlier this week, and indicated that there will be a response to a number of the critical issues we're facing in Alberta in the upcoming budget. And that's one of the reasons I came here. It was to emphasize the need for that, because we are facing a unique vulnerability. The whole Canadian economy is going to be facing a downturn tied to coronavirus. On top of that, we're facing a collapse in oil prices that will massively damage our economy and our fiscal health. And on top of that, we're riding 5 years of economic instability and fragility in the province. So we are in a uniquely vulnerable situation.
Let me ask you something, because I've been reading all these articles lately that sort of try and describe your tone and the way in which you're talking about these issues. Do you think you've ever gone too far or been too antagonistic towards the federal government where this stuff is concerned. I mean, you've basically accused them of, at times, and I am paraphrasing, I'm not quoting you directly, but it seems like you're saying, you guys are ruining the economy here. It's your fault.
Well, look, I have to speak frankly for the people I represent, and I think it's absolutely true that the 5 years of economic fragility, which has put us in a uniquely vulnerable position now, is in part because of federal policies. And you and I've talked about these things before. And I'll just give you an example. Like right now, we have the federal government moving forward with methane regulations that could force our energy companies to spend billions of dollars in new equipment, clean fuel standards, billions more, new plastics regulations that could jeopardize tens of billions of dollars of prospective new investment in the petrochemical industry that I've been working on. So,
but aren't they trying to balance a set of ideals that they've put forward that matters to them around climate
and
with
sure.
the economic interest that you're talking about?
Sure, and I just spoke to the CD Howe Institute here in Ottawa, and I said I recognize they were elected with a different mandate than me, and we share the commitment to reducing carbon emissions, and we think we've got.
Okay, so I just want to interject there for a moment, because this is essentially the focus of the problem in Canada. See, even if Kenney is of goodwill and wants to recognize a national ideal of protecting the environment, you cannot say that that ideal takes precedence over the people's interests that you govern, right? So Quebec's interests don't align with Alberta's interests at all. And Kenney is very clever about talking around it, but the fact of the matter is that people in our province have lost their jobs. The radicalization in government in terms of environmental ideals determining the future of our industry and making changes that Kenney just spoke of right there, that actually sabotage the industry, that are designed to kill its confidence by investors, kill investor confidence, to kill the future profitability of those companies which then employ Albertans. You cannot be so soft on Quebec for taking the stance and position, on the federal government for taking the stance and position that they do, when your industry, your life's blood for your province, is on the line and is being destroyed as we speak. Kenney does a great job of trying to remain neutral in front of the press. But, you know, he's very much in tune with the problem. And he's still, what I'm saying is, where's the balance? If you have anti-Alberta sentiment, the only way to combat it is to come at from the other side with as much force as your adversary. And you have to be strong like that. You cannot just say, oh, we concede with your environmental ideals and whatnot. And yes, we're doing our best to... Where does it end? When does it end? It will never end. It's like they'll steamroll you with their radical ideas. You know? It just... Ralph Klein would have laughed at them and then would have endeavored to punish them by cutting off oil to that province. And Kenney probably wouldn't say that because he would want the profitability of Quebec bringing in whatever money that they bring into the province for the oil that they purchase. But you cannot...
Very good.
You cannot proceed with the same... if your enemies are attacking you, say an adversary is a better option. If your enemies are attacking, your adversary is attacking, you cannot just roll over and play by the rules of their game, because that's their game. You're bound to lose out of the gate anyways. So why go to that level? Pardon me. it's pointless. And Alberta is suffering greatly because Kenney has failed to take a stronger stance and risk to be politically incorrect, let's say, and without neutrality, risking to actually be conservative and defend our province.
A model of success on and broadly on Indigenous reconciliation in Alberta.
Here you
And
go
those are
again,
the things
another
that I'm
one.
trying to get into a dialogue with him about. Since we came to office last May, I told the Prime Minister I was open to the 100 megaton cap on emissions and,
Oh my.
and a $30.
See, here he goes again. There is no limitations. There must never be limitations on a free market. Hence the term free market. If businesses know that in the future Alberta is going to keep putting on more and more caps and more regulation and more radical business practices like pardon me, like gender neutral hiring, let's say, and all kinds of nonsense like this. Not that, like, his hands, you're going to continue to be tied down by the ideologues that rule in those areas. So when I say there is a sentiment of separatism that need to be addressed in Alberta, really so. Really so. Defend Alberta's interests. Alberta's interests are not the same as the interests in Ontario or Quebec because they don't care. They would rather see the industry burn itself out and purchase somewhere else, like what BC did when we tried to punish them. I like if they're not our allies, then stop continuing to behave as if they're so. That's as simple as that.
Levy on major emitters that we brought in, and et cetera. But my point is now, surely, all of this requires a fresh look. The notion of imposing new costs on an industry which is on life support right now. I mean, we've seen most of our mid-sized energy companies lose 90% of their share value. Most of them are a negative cash flow. We are looking at prospectively large-scale layoffs, significant numbers of bankruptcies. I'm simply saying, do no harm. And by the way,
But don't you think
by the way, I would say to folks who are single-mindedly obsessed with carbon emissions, congratulations. You're going to see the largest single decline in CO2 emissions from the Canadian and global economies.
Oh my God. Here he goes again, playing into the hands of leftist ideologues. And when I said the gender neutral hiring, I didn't mean discrimination against any gender. What I meant was competence determines whether you're hired or not. Competence, above all, competence. Competence, not stupidity, not ideologically possessed, none of those things. And then here he goes again with this piece of nonsense. Let me repeat it. That
layoffs, significant numbers of bankruptcies. I'm simply saying, do no harm. And by the way,
But don't you think
by the way, I would say to folks who are single-mindedly obsessed with carbon emissions, congratulations. You're going to see the largest single decline in CO2 emissions from the Canadian and global economies in at least a couple of decades. Give us some breathing space to...
Why would you even go about saying it like that? Like, oh, when I look at these people, that they're actually happy because people are off the street. They're not producing. Give me a break. Give me a break. You don't want your house to be heated? You don't want cars? You don't want plastic components? I mean, the hypocrisy just goes on and on and on. It's exasperating. And the fact that Kenney would use that precise example, it's a sign of weakness. That's the wrong level to look at the situation, as if environmentalism has become our god, let's say. That's really the core of the issue, that Canadians in education have actually failed because what they've done is they have impressed upon a set of values on our people through education that have made them strongly inclined toward the environment that have radicalized them. Not thinking for a second that oil is what helped build this country, especially this province. Prime Minister Trudeau's grandfather made his fortune in oil. What an ironic coincidence that his grandson, and his son should be the people to destroy it. And, you know, if we play into the ideologue's game, that's why Kenney addressed the problem completely wrong. He should be attacking. Never mind about diplomacy right now. You have no idea how desperate the situation is in Calgary and Alberta, generally speaking. People are out of work. Suicides are up. People are becoming homeless. People are losing their livelihoods. People are moving away. It's exactly like Detroit. That's what it's culminating into in Calgary. The new invisible ghost town. I really enjoy that notion. Oil is dying. What are you doing to actually help the people whom are creating jobs for your province, Kenney? You know, your weakness as a leader just exposed very well in this conversation. Even Vashi is trying to say, you know, like, how can you say that when the people that are under your purview are desperate for work? All they want to do is return to their jobs. Kenney doesn't want to separate, but Kenney should already be talking about separating and joining the U.S. That would be the answer to all our prayers, especially if Trump is reelected. It would be, not only would he cut the bureaucracy that's happening to us now, but I have a feeling after Alberta leaves Confederation that Canada will dissolve, because the Quebecers will have nothing left. They're depending on us for so many things, but I mean, you know, I wish that they would separate, because there's so much incentive and so much jealousy from that province, and not from all Quebecers, because we have many friends in Quebec that are actually sympathetic to Alberta. I'm not saying everybody, but the leaders in their government are anti-Alberta, anti-pipeline. And it's, you know, separation is the best thing for Alberta to make. And Kenney doesn't even mention it. It's a joke. Get the discussions on the table now. Yesterday, last month, last year, I mean, I've been talking about this already for a couple years now. It's like, how long are you going to keep ignoring the growing problem? Canada has become deeply environmentally radicalized. And as the oil sector can't grow here, what is going to be your alternative when all of the jobs are gone? The companies no longer see a future. They don't see a future in this economy right now. So wait a few more years and many, many more will leave. And they won't come back. Like, Premier KLEIN worked hard to get the dying economy of Alberta after he took office, to bring that back. Him, Jim Dinging, and Rod Love, the three of them, they worked so hard, Dinning especially, to reform Alberta, to get it out of debt and to make it into a powerhouse, which they achieved. That dream they achieved, and now it's all been destroyed. So it's like, Kenney can continue trying to remain neutral, but that's not going to help anybody. Like, zero. And I don't appreciate him just bowing down to that hypothetical environmental ideal. And criticize me if you want, but I mean, you can't be a petroleum oriented industry in the province and pretend that you're going to cede your future to environmental ideals that are not that won't help the prosperity of the industry in the future. You can't ask for people to invest in that kind of limitation. No way. What do you expect them to do? I wouldn't. You're talking about billions of dollars, billions and billions of dollars that they have to pay for nonsense. Let them conduct their affairs free of encumbrance and watch them grow. They'll produce so much money for your lofty ideals. But if there's no money in the bank, you can't keep talking about your lofty hypothetical ideas. I just did that YouTube interview with CPC interview with the leader of the bloc, and it's reprehensible that he could even talk that way. And Kenney would talk like this, trying to be a gentleman when your adversaries seek to destroy what we've got. There's no middle ground. You've already failed. You can't negotiate. There's no amount of negotiation that will let us conduct our affairs in peace. They'll keep limiting and limiting us with all kind of bureaucracy for the environment, hypothetical environmental cleanliness, until they've killed our industry entirely. That's the goal. Why are you so weak, Kenney? You don't want to admit the fact that that's what's happening. Canada has no room anymore for Alberta. They just don't. Maybe Saskatchewan does. I don't know. They probably would leave with us. But the rest of it, the major governing bodies of this federal politics don't care. It's over. Anyways, forgive my rant. It's already been 22 minutes. I thank you for watching and have a good day. Bye-bye.